What if a single flop could erase a studio's future overnight? In the 1960s, Hollywood finally shook off the old production code, cranked budgets into the stratosphere, and promised viewers the moon. But when those wagers missed, the crash rattled every soundstage on Sunset Boulevard. Tonight, we're unsealing 15 cinematic calamities, films so costly, cursed, or gobsmackingly strange that even their stars sometimes deny they existed. Some have clawed their way back as cult royalty. Others are still radioactive. Either way, each story proves that failure is often louder and far more revealing than success. Ready to tour the wreckage? Let's count them down. Number 15, King Rat, 1965. A jungle swamp in Singapore, 1945. Inside a Japanese POW camp, Corporal King runs black market schemes, so slick they make the guards look lazy. Hustle keeps him fat, while officers gnaw on boiled weeds. Mid-60s viewers, raised on flag-waving heroes, weren't ready for a story where virtue gets you killed and cockroach stew counts as dinner. Columbia's marketing team panicked, sold it as a standard men-on-a-mission picture, and sent audiences home shell-shocked. Trade papers reported empty houses from London to Los Angeles, and several Commonwealth territories banned the film outright for its unflattering portrait of British command. Yet, time has been shockingly kind. Vietnam veterans in the 80s adopted King Rat as the real war movie of its decade. Brian De Palma even screened it privately for the cast of Casualties of War. A rumored 4K restoration now has collectors hovering like buzzards over barbed wire. If a bleak survival tale could freeze the mid-60s box office, imagine the carnage when a director and his own studio drew real steel. Number 14, Major Dundee. Sam Peckinpah finally landed a big Civil War western and immediately turned the set into a saloon brawl. He drank through deadlines, rewrote pages between takes, and let the body count climb in scenes Columbia executives hadn't approved. Charlton Heston surrendered his entire salary to keep the picture afloat, then threatened Peckinpah with a cavalry saber when the schedule slipped past the danger line. Columbia seized the negative, carved away 40 minutes, and released an amputated cut critics called tantamount to cinematic friendly fire. Receipts barely covered the marketing printout. But legend travels faster than ledger sheets. A fan-funded search in the 1990s uncovered key reels, and a long-gestating director's cut premiered to packed revival houses. Arrow's 2023 4K set lets viewers toggle between the studio's panic edit and Peckinpah's unflinching original, finally elevating Major Dundee from drunken footnote to missing link between Ride the High Country and The Wild Bunch. If that backstage knife fight spilled real blood, the next entry strapped dynamite to locomotives and still managed to derail. Number 13, The Train. Burt Lancaster demanded authenticity, and authenticity meant detonating full-size steam engines. 5 days in, he fired his original director for moving too slowly, then brought in John Frankenheimer, who cranked the danger dial to 11, live TNT, under real rail lines, Lancaster leaping across moving flat cars until he blew out a knee, halting production for weeks. The French Rail Authority literally ripped up functioning tracks to stage a crash so spectacular the crew held their breath between takes. All that smoke, steel, and sweat cost United Artists a fortune. Unfortunately, 1964 was drowning in World War II movies, and audiences assumed the train was just one more. Domestic grosses sputtered. Overseas sales barely refueled the tank. Decades later, directors from Christopher Nolan to Catherine Bigelow cite its thunderous practical mayhem as a holy text. A razor-sharp UHD release in 2023 finally let newcomers taste the grit in every bolt, and wonder how a film this visceral could ever be overlooked. If molten metal couldn't pull crowds, picture the box office cliff dive when an epic siege collapsed under its own weight. Number 12. 55 Days at Peking. Producer Samuel Bronston built a cardboard forbidden city in the Spanish desert and filled it with Charlton Heston, Ava Gardner, David Niven, and almost as many off-camera arguments. Gardner quit mid-shoot, director Nicholas Ray collapsed from exhaustion, and replacement Andrew Martin fought to keep extras from fainting in wool uniforms under a merciless Iberian sun. The finished film lumbered past the 3-hour mark, offering Edwardian pageantry just as Beatlemania began bulldozing polite taste. China banned it. British critics scoffed. American families chose Cleopatra for their annual epic allotment. Bronston's dream lost millions, but the sets survived long enough to decorate spaghetti westerns and Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. In film schools today, Ray's newly published diaries read like a fevered autopsy of old Hollywood excess. Proof that even a disaster can leave haunting footprints in the sand. If sun-baked overreach bled gold from the treasury, wait until real Soviet tanks rolled over a Hollywood schedule. Number 11. The Bridge at Remagen. Nothing ruins a shoot like an invasion. In August 1968, with half the footage in the can, Warsaw-packed armor stormed Prague. The American cast sprinted across the border, clutching camera magazines. Czech extras burned their uniforms to avoid arrest. Leading man George Siegel supposedly begged his agent for a desk job. United Artists salvaged what it could, rewrote ending pages in Germany, and released a stitched-together war picture that opened opposite the far more glamorous Battle of Britain. The timing couldn't have been worse. Anti-war sentiment ran high, and audiences were wary of another Men-at-Arms saga. Box office dribbled. The film slid quietly into late-night TV slots, and the real drama was forgotten until Cold War historians in the 1990s unearthed memos describing a Hollywood crew trapped by Soviet tanks. That anecdote alone revived interest. Small-run Blu-rays now sell out to military buffs who marvel that the only U.S. feature ever halted by an invasion still delivers a taut final battle. If geopolitics can hijack a film, nostalgia alone won't save the gargantuan musical up next. Number 10. Hello, Dolly! Gene Kelly marched 1,000 extras down a Gilded Age New York street set that cost more than most dramas' entire budgets. Barbara Streisand, only 26, played Widow Levi, character age, mid-40s, while trading venomous barbs with Walter Matthau. So loud, Teamsters took bets on who'd swing first. Fox spent $25 million, then wrapped the movie in a roadshow boo. Souvenir programs, overture music, the works. Unfortunately, 1969's young audience was busy dropping acid at Woodstock, not buying reserved seats for a 3-hour Valentine to turn-of-the-century waltzing. Ticket sales crawled. Accountants wept. The film's losses helped convince Fox to shutter its in-house orchestra. Yet, Hello, Dolly refuses to die. Pixar's WALL-E repackaged 2 of its songs, prompting Gen Z TikTok lip syncs. A 4K scan in 2021 showcased its candy floss palette. Streisand's vocal takes still Shatterglass. Time, it seems, loves a hopeless romantic, just not always on opening weekend. If a parade that big could march into red ink, watch what happens when Marlon Brando mutinies into... Number 9. Mutiny on the Bounty. MGM spent $19 million building a full-rigged tall ship, shipping crew to Tahiti, and indulging Marlon Brando's every whim. Brando rewrote dialogue daily, refused to shoot during high surf, and cultivated an accent that wandered from Cornwall to Cannes. He ate caviar by the jar while the schedule bled millions. By release, word of mouth labeled Mutiny a 4-hour slog. Reviewers savaged Brando's Rococo pronunciation. Box office clawed back barely half the cost. MGM posted its first major annual loss in decades, and Brando's career drifted until The Godfather rewrote the ledger 10 years later. Yet sailors worldwide now screen Mutiny for its meticulous tall ship rigging. Maritime museums list it as a reference title. Brando's improvised flourishes, once mocked, feel eerily modern beside today's loose, actor-driven dramas. The lesson? One generation's indulgence can be another's innovation. If a superstar's ego could sink a studio, an Egyptian queen's jewel-studded crown was about to crush it into dust. Number 8. Cleopatra. 4 directors, 2 continents, and 1 tabloid inferno. Elizabeth Taylor's near-fatal pneumonia shut down London sets, forced a move to Rome, and blew the budget past $44 million, over $400 million today. Richard Burton arrived, sparks flew, and gossip sheets printed Liz and Dick headlines larger than war news. Fox financed delays by selling its backlot to real estate developers. Studio chiefs were fired mid-edit. Yes, opening weekends saw lines curling around blocks, But even blockbuster grosses couldn't patch a deficit that size. Cleopatra became the poster child for Hollywood hubris. The studio's cash crisis opened the door for a scrappy young producer named George Lucas to rent cheap space years later and shoot Star Wars on the same stages. The 1990s 70mm restoration reframed Cleopatra as a glittering, if lumbering, marvel. Costume designers still mine it for runway ideas and tailors cobalt eyeliner trends on Instagram every awards season. Lavish as ever, the film now whispers a caution Hollywood keeps forgetting. Spectacle alone won't balance a budget. And if you think that was costly, our next chapter plunges from pop stardom into psychedelic self-destruction. Stay tuned for number 7. Number 7, Head. It opens with a suicide leap and never stops free-falling. The Monkees, America's bubblegum darlings, hired a young Jack Nicholson to detonate their squeaky clean image in a swirl of psychedelia, war zone newsreel, and self-mockery. Teen fans expecting Daydream Believer got Vietnam napalm and a talking cow. Columbia's promo team, clueless, cut a trailer that literally spoiled every scene because nobody would believe it anyway. 1 week later, the film vanished, earning less than the catering bill and turning the prefab four into pop culture orphans. But counterculture night owls rescued Head in the 70s, spinning its nose flute soundtrack and fourth wall pranks at midnight screenings. Today, media studies classes hail it as a scorched earth satire of manufactured fame that predates reality TV burnout by decades. Criterion's remastered Blu-ray proved those retina-burn neon visuals were never meant for broadcast fuzz. If a bridge-jumping boy band couldn't survive their own head trip, picture a space adventurer who strip teases in zero-G and still crashes to Earth. Number 6, Barbarella. Jane Fonda floats in a silver bubble, slowly shedding vinyl while syrupy lounge music oozes through outer space. Producer Dino De Laurentiis bet that comic book kink could conquer sci-fi, but 1968 America was still clutching its pearls. Reviewers sneered at the styrofoam planets. Church groups protested the infamous excessive machine that nearly pleasures Barbarella to death. Paramount's U.S. gross barely covered Fonda's thigh-high boots. Europe, however, devoured every glitter spray frame. Designers copied Paco Rabanne's metal bikinis. Italian discos projected the zero-gravity strip scene on loop. By the 1990s, Madonna name-checked Barbarella in tour costumes, and pop divas from Kylie to Dua Lipa revived the bubble helmet Chak. A 70mm festival print toured in 2022, outselling most new releases on a per-screen basis. Rumors of a Sydney Sweeney remake prove that, half a century later, Barbarella is no longer a punchline. She's the patron saint of camp futurism. If cosmic kink can orbit from flop to fashion Bible, the next film shows how realism and star power can still sink like a stone. Number 5, The Sand Pebbles. A U.S. gunboat steams up the Yangtze in 1920s China, and Steve McQueen, fueled by nicotine and method intensity, sweats out his only Oscar-nominated role. Shooting in Taiwan, director Robert Wise battled typhoons, malaria outbreaks, and a star who insisted on doing every boiler room stunt himself. The budget crept past $12 million. Fox rolled it out as a premium roadshow with souvenir programs and an intermission overture. But nightly Vietnam War coverage made audiences wary of long, brutal combat sagas. Box office numbers looked healthy at the cash register, yet couldn't recoup the bloated overhead for years. Critics kept the flame. Navy historians tout its engine room authenticity. Restoration engineers unveiled a pin-sharp 4K transfer in 2023 that finally captures Joe McDonald's shimmering heat haze. TikTok cinephiles clip the tragic Coolie sequence as the moment Hollywood's golden anti-hero fully stepped into Vietnam-era moral ambiguity. If a critical darling still ran aground, brace yourself for an Italian art film maestro who blew up suburbia, literally, and left MGM in ruins. Number 4, Zabriskie Point. Michelangelo Antonioni arrived in California with a suitcase of symbolism and an MGM credit line. He hired 2 non-actors fresh from campus protests, stuck them in Death Valley, and filmed sun-baked ennui until studio executives baked as well. Dialogue drifted like tumbleweed. The $7 million budget quietly doubled while Antonioni waited for the perfect desert light. Test audiences laughed at the endless dune love scene. Critics called the movie a mirage of meaning. MGM's big summer hope evaporated, dragging the company's stock price down with it. Fast forward, that finale, an idyllic suburb exploding in balletic slow motion to Pink Floyd, has become meme legend. Environmental scholars dissect the airborne refrigerators and mannequins as a prophecy of consumer collapse. Fashion shoots mimic Daria's dusty fringe jacket. Music videos swipe the 360 pan of lovers lost in sand. What once felt like hot air now registers as a time capsule of American disillusion. If a desert mirage bankrupted its backers, the next epic toppled an empire, on screen and off. Number 3. The Fall of the Roman Empire. Producer Samuel Bronston erected a life-size forum in Spain, imported 8,000 extras, and aimed for the definitive sword and sandals saga. What he got was a 3-hour philosophy lecture wrapped in gold leaf. By the time Sophia Loren finished her final monologue, matinee audiences were longing for James Bond's jetpacks. Box office intake covered maybe a quarter of the $18 million spend. Within months, Bronston's empire collapsed into bankruptcy court, and his mammoth sets were auctioned for pennies. Yet Ridley Scott's Gladiator lifted its snow-dusted opening battle almost shot for shot, pushing modern viewers to rediscover Bronston's original. A 2019 4K remaster unveiled Jack Cardiff's iron gray palette in frosty splendor, and historians praised the script's eerily prescient warnings about imperial rot. In the end, Bronston's ruin became a quarry for future classics. If imperial overreach can still inspire blockbusters, imagine a gangster rock star mind swap so shocking Warner Bros. Locked it in a vault. Number 2. Performance. Picture late 60s London at its grubbiest. Cray-era gangsters, rubbing shoulders with rock royalty in smoky Chelsea basements. That's where co-directors Nicholas Roeg and Donald Cammell set out to fuse two worlds that had never met on film: organized crime and psychedelic self-dissolution. Cammell, a former Soho bohemian painter, lured real East End heavies on set to coach James Fox's razor-wielding Chaz. Their presence amped the tension. Legends still whisper about prop guns swapped for real ones. Fox shadowed a convicted bookmaker for weeks, then vanished so deeply into character, even friends barely recognized him. Meanwhile, Mick Jagger, at peak Stone's hysteria, improvised lyrics, hosted 3 a.m. jam sessions, and coaxed live snakes into the townhouse bathtub for atmosphere. When Warner Brass finally screened the cut, pulsing with frontal nudity, mescaline montages, and a revolver fired point-blank into the lens, one exec muttered, "This will get us all arrested." Another's wife vomited in the aisle. The studio buried the film in a 2-cinema dump release. Opening weekend? $900. An embarrassment. Yet, the movie refused to die. Midnight circuits looped Jagger's slithering Memo from Turner. Bowie stole the eyeliner. Punk zines hailed it as Britain's first truly modern film. A Warner 2016 restoration and a shimmering 2024 4K master unleashed Rogue's jewel-tone color, cementing performance on the BFI Top 100. Proof that art once labeled evil trash can claw its way to canon. If that condemned mind trip could resurrect itself, our number 1 sank a revered director's career overnight, then rose as the godfather of modern horror. Number 1. Peeping Tom. Michael Powell was Britain's cinematic golden boy. The red shoes, a matter of life and death, technicolor dreams that danced. Then he pointed the camera back at us and got torched for it. Mark Lewis, shy focus puller by day, moonlights as a serial killer who films women at the instant a spring-loaded blade pierces their throats. His goal: capture pure fear, splice it into a documentary on the physiology of terror. Powell floods the screen with camera lenses, mirrors, and our own reflected curiosity, daring us to admit we watch movies for the same thrill. British critics erupted. The Daily Express thundered, "Sick!" The Observer spat, "Moral putrefaction." Cinema chains yanked prints within a week. Powell, who even cameoed as Lewis's abusive father, was blacklisted overnight. Financing vanished. Friends stopped answering the phone. He drifted to Australia, shooting SEAGULL documentaries, while Hitchcock, safely in Hollywood, unleashed Psycho to box office glory 6 months later. bootleg 16mm prints circulated in 70s film clubs. A young Martin Scorsese, gobsmacked by its audacity, hunted down a battered reel and declared it a movie about the madness of making movies. Italian giallo masters borrowed its subjective killer point of view. Brian De Palma lifted the camera as weapon conceit wholesale. The BFI restored Peeping Tom in 1997. A crystalline 2023 4K scan unleashed Powell's lurid reds, bathing London's seedy newsagents in fever dream glow. Scholars now hail it as the first true slasher, an avant-garde treatise on voyeurism, and a spooky prophecy of our camera-obsessed culture. Powell's reputation, once ashes, is now burnished gold. The film screens annually alongside Psycho as Twin Peaks of 1960 horror. The movie we were told to avert our eyes from became the one we can't stop studying. 15 misfires, 3 ruined studios, and 1 director exiled to documentary oblivion. Yet every wreck we unearthed now glows with strange afterlight. King Rat foreshadowed Vietnam's moral murk. Major Dundee birthed Peckinpah's bullet ballet. Barbarella taught fashion that space could flirt in metallic pink. And Peeping Tom, reviled as filth, became film school bedrock. So what's the real takeaway? Risk ages better than safety. Audiences may punish you today, critics may jeer tomorrow, but time loves flipping verdicts. In Hollywood, as in life, the louder the crash, the richer the legend. Now it's your turn in the director's chair. Which sidelined epic deserves a 4K revival? Which forgotten flop should stay buried? Drop your verdict in the comments. Smash that like if cinematic train wrecks fascinate you, and subscribe, because next week we dive into the 1970s disaster that tried to bankroll itself with black market arms deals. Until then, remember, in show business, failure may be fleeting, but the stories it leaves behind are box office gold forever.